Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our second office hour on California's BEAD sub-grantee selection process. My name is Ali Eshraghi, and I serve as a program and project supervisor for the BEAD program here at the California Public Utilities Commission, CPUC. I'm joined today by my colleagues from the CPUC and CTC Technology and Energy, and they will introduce themselves as they answer your questions. Here's the agenda for today's session. We have started with a brief welcome and some housekeeping notes. This includes an overview of how to navigate the Zoom interface and the scope of this webinar, this office hour. We'll then move on to the main segment where we'll address your questions and provide answers we can. And if we need to take some of your questions back, and I'm pretty sure that will be the case for some of the questions, we'll do that and include them in our FAQ document. And finally, we'll wrap up by outlining next steps and sharing some important reminders. Next slide. So let's cover the guidelines for participating in today's Q&A session. To ask a question, please write your question in the chat, raise your hand, and wait to be called on before speaking. Keep yourself on mute until it's your turn to speak. If you're called upon to clarify any parts of your question, please provide the clarification in the chat afterward. This helps us accurately capture your input for inclusion in our FAQ document. We'll start the first round of questions, giving everyone a chance to ask one question. Please avoid multi-part questions during this round. After the initial round, if time allows, we open the floor to additional questions. If you would like to follow up on someone else's question, please write it in the chat and wait to be called upon. Thank you for your cooperation. Next slide. So here's some information to guide today's session. The session is focused on questions about the sub-grantee selection process, specifically the topics covered in our previous webinars: pre-qualification, program design, project area, negotiations and selection, program evaluation, applicant financial requirements, technical requirements, and matching funds. Several aspects of the BEAD program are still being finalized. Some questions, as I mentioned earlier, may need to be addressed in a future session or in our FAQ document. There will be questions that we might not be able to provide answer during this session. We will take those questions back, review them, and include the responses in our FAQ document. If you have questions about the challenge process, please email them to bead@cpuc.ca.gov. This session is focused, as I mentioned, on the sub-grantee selection process, and we may not have the subject matter experts present to address challenge-related questions. As a reminder, the CPUC is required to follow the rules established by the NTIA, which administers the BEAD program. And as again, questions and answers from today's meeting will be posted in the FAQ session of our website. Additionally, we are recording this session, and the recording will also be made available on our website. Thank you for joining us today, and let's get started. I think we can take the slides down. So now we are ready for your questions. If you have a question, please write your question in the chat, raise your hand, and wait to be called upon before speaking. Just going through, I see some questions in the chat. So the first question: when will the recording be available for the previous office hours and the BEAD applicant webinars? I would say in the next few days, by next week, definitely. What updates can you give us on the sub-grantee selection timeline? Jonathan, do you want to take that?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jonathan Lackitz. I'm a manager in the communications division. We anticipate in the next several weeks we'll be posting a timeline, which will include some more details about when applications and pre-qualification rounds will start. So please make sure to sign up for our constant contacts and check our website, but we should have that up in the next couple of weeks. Thank you.
The next question is a very specific question on the Marin County. Should I read the question, Jonathan, or
I think I will ask Ziggy if you wouldn't mind taking a first
sure?
crack at that answer. Thank you, please.
Yes, sure. It's an excellent question, actually. So to restate it slightly, if you've got a mixture of both high, it's not really high risk, it's high cost, but I'm assuming that that's what this refers to. So just for those who forgot or and need a little bit of a primer, there are certain census block groups that NTA has designated as high cost. Those are exempt from the 25% requirement. So the question is, if you have a project area that consists of both high cost and regular census block groups, how do you figure out what your percentage is going to be? And the answer is, it's simply proportional to the number of broadband serviceable locations that you have. So the final percentage is essentially weighted by the relative amount of broadband service, eligible broadband service locations in your project areas. So I don't have time to go through the calculation here, so I can't tell you if it's correct or not. I'll certainly do it after this meeting and confirm or post another a correction if it's not right. But it's not, you're not apportioning actual costs from the CBGs in that manner.
So the next question is, before we move on, Jonathan, anything to add?
No, thank you, Ziggy, for answering that.
Thanks. So let's move on to the next question. Would you confirm that the audited financial are only required if an applicant has been awarded a grant as opposed to when submitted audited financials? They just copied the requirement from the volume 2. Ziggy?
Yeah, I don't recall. I need to take a look at it. I don't recall if this was specific to those entities that are that cannot because of the type of entity they are, they cannot get these audited financials, and they have a justification for it, or if it is applies to everybody. So I need to look at the volume 2 there.
Great. So thank you, Ziggy. So we will add that to our frequently asked questions when we publish them.
Thank you. The next question is about the challenge map. So I can read the question, Jonathan, if you want to answer. If not, you can take it offline. The challenge map in the CPUC challenge portal currently reflects bid eligibility post-challenge. Will there be a true-up of this map? If so, when? And when should we have access to the final unserved and underserved CSV location files so we can begin final network design?
So thank you for that question. We are working with NTIA to finalize our results, and I anticipate similar to the timeline, but maybe slightly longer, in the next several weeks, we will be publishing final results from the challenge process, and we do that, we will also include CSV location files. And then that will establish the final set of locations that are eligible for funding, with one caveat. As other programs, broadband programs, both at the state and federal level, make awards, those locations will also, the list of eligible locations will be impacted by those awards. So we will periodically be reflecting that information on our map, but it's not going to be real time. In particular, the federal funding account, about every 2 weeks has been making new awards. So that's something that entities should be aware of. If there's an award from the federal funding account in their area that happens after when we post the final challenge results, those locations will be considered to be served if they're covered by a an enforceable commitment, i.e. an award from the federal funding account. That concludes my answer.
Thank you, Jonathan. So the next question, are there any requirements that differ from the posted checklist for tribal entities? So we are working on the application materials and the requirements, and we plan to basically in one of the future webinars cover those, as well as like publishing those as we go through developing those. But basically there might be more as we develop those. But anything to add, Jonathan or Ziggy?
The only thing I would add is that the flavor might be a little bit different. I can imagine that if you're a tribal entity and you need to get consent from the tribal entity, then it obviously looks a little different and is much simpler. But you'll be subject, generally speaking, to the same types of requirements as other applicants.
So the next two questions are also about the challenge process. Jonathan, do you want me to read them and then answer, or like the answer that you already gave in terms of our process for the finalizing the map would be sufficient?
So generally, I would say that many of these questions will be answered when we publish the final map. I do know that we are currently using Fabric version 4, and I do not know if we're going to be, whether that will be changing as we open up the subgrantee selection process. But at this point, the challenge map that we will be posting will be using Fabric version 4. With regards to the more detailed questions about the particular vintages of which data sets are being used, that will all be detailed when the map is posted.
Thank you.
And I think that covers the next question too.
Yes. So we just wait for other questions to come up. So the next question, looking for, Ziggy, do you want to take that?
Sure. So in terms of breaking up large census block groups, the answer is there are no current plans to break up census block groups. And there are two options for managing the relatively high cost in some of those areas. One is to provide the alternative percentage proposal and remove the most costly locations. And the other option, of course, is to look at a different, more affordable technology. Of course, that might mean that if somebody can make this cost effective with fiber, then they would obviously be awarded before your proposal is evaluated. But if that is the most feasible approach in a very high cost CBGs, then that's what you should pursue.
Thank you. The next question is again about the final map. We did not participate in the challenge process. We did submit data on the June 30 FCC BDC, and we'll update data in the 31st of December BDC. We offer qualifying RBS service. Will we be protected from being overbilled with BEAD funding?
I'll start answering this, and feel free, Ziggy, to expand upon my answer. So the NTIA, the NOFO that the NTIA issued has a broad requirement that locations not be double funded. There are a number of mechanisms that the NTIA has laid out in the NOFO for opportunities for states that are conducting subgrantee selection processes to update the information. I can't speak to the specifics about when you submit information into a BDC to FCC about when that gets reflected and whether that will be reflected in the challenge map that we will be posting in the next several weeks. But in general, we are looking to make sure that we're aware of changes that occur. It's the guidance that's provided by the NTIA provides some flexibility to state broadband offices about how to accommodate those types of true-up activities. Is there anything you would like to add, Ziggy?
Yeah, I know that this is something that is still a little bit in flux, but generally speaking, there is a pre-selection and post-selection possible process. In general, NTIA will require the same kind of standards of proof that you saw in the challenge process. So you can't just report, oh, we have service, and then that will be said, well, we can't overbuild it. You have to actually be able to demonstrate it. And that can be, and NTIA has provided some kind of draft outlines of what that could look like in terms of a true-up type of situation. They don't call it true-up, but basically before the final eligible locations are published, and also a post-selection where you, during the application process, demonstrate which locations you know are already served. And what NTIA has recommended in those cases, now we're getting into weeds, and this is subject to change. So, but one of the mechanisms NTIA has proposed is that if you are the provider, that you bid on those areas and provide essentially $0 proposals for those locations, which obviously would make it very competitive.
Thank you. So waiting for the next question.
I can take that.
Okay, thanks.
In terms of competitiveness, and with the caveat that we're still finalizing certain aspects of the process and the approach, where the cost really comes into the picture is on the extremely high cost per allocation threshold or the area budget. So yes, you may be able to score very high, but if it's too costly, you can't get selected because you exceed the point at which it's considered untenable from a financial perspective. We just don't have enough of a budget to allow fiber, if that's the case, or reliable broadband service. So it becomes part of the selection process.
And we can add more to that as we developed our FAQ document and the application guideline. Will $0 applications be free from the post-reporting and compliance requirement of BEAD, since no BEAD funds will be spent on those CBGs?
I think that's a question that we'll need to take back and look at. I don't remember there being an explicit exemption in the NOFO. So I'm not sure that it's a question we would need to research. But my first guess would be that, not remembering a specific exemption, that even though a grant would be made and no dollars would be awarded, a grant would still be made.
And Bruce, I saw your note. Let's see if there isn't any other questions. We go back to your follow-up question to the Marin County. So Bruce, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, hi, Bruce Vogan from Marin County. Listen, what I'm hearing with regard to matching funds on the mixed kind of census block groups we're working with, I'm working under the assumption I'm just reading it for the fact it says there are no matching funds for a high cost census block. I'm just assuming that is categorical. There is no proration of any combination of census block groups I could include in a project area that would allow for a single location in that high cost census block to be assessed a matching fund. We're a county, so we're going to have to we don't normally go out looking for matching funds for infrastructure grants. We're going to have to find that money now for this particular. So I need to know exactly what the formula is before, so that I can assure our board of supervisors and elected leaders that this is the exact amount of money we anticipate needing based upon the estimates we get from our design firm. So I'm hearing proration, and I don't understand how the proration would work. So I need that formula. That's what I'm asking.
So we'll get that to you in the FAQ.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And I would suggest that this is Jonathan, for the follow-up questions from Kevin, that we will work on the responses in our FAQ to those questions. There's some interesting comments that you raised there, but I don't think we're prepared to address them today.
Kevin, go ahead.
So completely understand, and I just know other states are having to deal with that with some of the, let's say, true up of the of removing locations that have been built out prior to the application. So a lot of things to look at there, and we're happy to talk to you about it if you want. I deal across a lot of different states. But the one question I had, and I missed the earlier office hours, so I apologize if this isn't exactly right. When I was on like the original subgrantee selection webinar, I got the impression that California was going to approach the BEAD program as really a budget limit program, meaning they're going to look at their BEAD funding. They're going to allocate that based on all of the different proposed serving areas or CBGs with an amount that's proportional to, a modeled cost basis, and then use that to kind of decide, decide what projects would get funded in each one of those sites. Is that, did I understand that correctly, or is it something different? And I'll ask kind of the bottom line question. The bottom line is, does California have enough funding to do the BEAD build out to all unserved and underserved locations? Because there is an issue between the goal of Internet for All and having the funding to do that.
I could start by answering the last part of your question first, which is that yes, we believe that we have sufficient funding to be able to fund all locations, all unserved and underserved locations determined as a result of the challenge process through a combination of reliable broadband service and alternative technologies. What that mix looks like, of course, will depend in large part upon the applications that we receive. With regards to your question about our establishing budgets for each area, we're going to use a number of factors, not just cost models. We're also going to look at the actual applications. And the way I try to describe this problem is that we will receive hopefully applications for all areas. And then we will go through an exercise of, consistent with the requirements of the NOFO, first maximizing the amount of fiber investments we can make. And then next we will look at other reliable broadband services, primarily fixed wireless, but also hybrid fiber coax. And then we would move to alternative technologies. So it's an optimization problem. It's not quite as simple as setting a budget for each area. We will be using cost model information to help us understand as we evaluate individual applications, sort of to get a better understanding of what the proponents are proposing. Ziggy, is there anything you'd like to add to that answer?
Only that just remind everybody that the selection has to be primarily based on scoring. So we look at the score first, and then we see does it exceed a threshold after which that particular technology is just not feasible because it's too costly. So we're still going first and foremost by scale.
Thank you. That's an important clarification.
Thank you.
I did have one follow-up with that, if I can.
Go ahead.
So I understand that process, and I also understand that that the state is going to be the one that defines the thresholds in which those technologies are going to be decided. And what I guess the only thing I can say is, with the priorities that the NTIA has made in the as part of the BEAD program, there are going to be many states that at the end of the day are not going to be able to get to every unserved and underserved locations. And so my concern is I would hate to see California setting cost thresholds based on technology just to try and do just to try and say we served every unserved and underserved location, because what that's going to do is that's going to essentially force locations down the technology food chain, which is also kind of the cost chain, right? Fiber would become fixed wireless would become potentially unlicensed fixed wireless fixed wireless might become satellite. And so I just caution, I would just caution not making sure that you deploy the best technology while being good stewards of it, not necessarily arbitrarily setting a goal of internet for everyone and driving the choices that way. Thank you.
Thank you for your thoughts on this topic.
Okay, let's give it a few more minutes to see if there are any other questions. So the next question, Ziggy, do you want to take that? Should I read the question or can you read it?
Yeah, I'll try to do this. There's the mechanism is, and I understand the theoretical issue of potentially having sort of proposals that or have scored exactly the same, but IPv2 does actually outline a process for resolving that situation based on number of unserved locations that you can cover. So a situation in which you score the exact same and have the exact same number of unserved BSLs, it's highly unlikely, although nothing in life is impossible. But even in those cases, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
And just to make sure that we're clarifying all the points, the cost per BSL is not a scored factor, correct?
Correct. So the answer to the last question that just popped up is yes. If you have a proposal that has a 1 point scoring advantage, then it scores higher.
I want to ask if you could clarify. That's all other things being exactly identical between the two proposals, which is based upon my experience of having worked on other grant programs in the state of California is rarely ever the case. I can't actually think of an example where two grantees have proposed exactly the same project in exactly the same area for exactly the same cost with all the criteria. So I appreciate that there's a concern about spending money efficiently, and we share that concern. But these hypotheticals are, I would say, exceedingly unlikely to occur, that often there are significant differences between applicants and their proposals and the geographic areas. So that it's because we're allowing applicants to design their program areas, there will be a number of factors that will be different that will result in geographic differences in terms of their projects, but also likely in their score. So that while we have thought through and thought about these situations, we would consider it exceedingly rare that this would actually occur.
And I do encourage everybody to read the IPv2. It does lay all this out, especially in utilizing the extremely high cost per location threshold section, where it outlines the steps for the selection.
Thank you. So giving it another minute to see if there are any other questions. If not, we can wrap up.
I could follow up on this question, Ali. As I addressed earlier, we're anticipating in the next several weeks that we will be posting a timeline which will include the pre-application and application phases deadlines, the start of the periods, the start and end of the periods.
Thank you. Okay, can we have the slides back up? So since we are not seeing any more questions, we go ahead with wrapping up this session. If you haven't already, please sign up using this link to receive email updates about the BEAD program. For questions about California BEAD sub-grantee selection process, email beadgrant@cpuc.ca.gov. For other inquiries about the BEAD program in California, use the other email that we have, bead@cpuc.ca.gov. As mentioned earlier, we are developing a specific FAQ document for the sub-grantee selection process, and once finalized, it will be posted on our website for your reference. Next slide. Over the next few months, we continue with our webinars and office hours on Tuesday and Thursdays, 1 to 2 p.m. as part of our BEAD outreach opportunities. These webinars and office hours are open to anyone interested in attending. Registration links will be available on the BEAD events page. These sessions provide an open forum for stakeholders to ask specific questions, seek clarification, and receive guidance on the BEAD application process. The stakeholders are encouraged to attend these sessions to fully understand the requirements and opportunities provided through the BEAD program. These events are designed to promote transparency, collaboration, and success for all potential sub-grantees. Thank you for your participation and engagement today. Have a great afternoon.